This is The Messenger, the Rachel Cancer Scam. This is episode 1. I want to invite you to come on my journey. I'm going to take you through a world of love and loss, through heartbreak and heartache. This is my story. It's my experience with Rachel. Let me tell you about Rachel. Rachel's what the guys mean when they say a woman is a dime. She's a 10. You'll hear me say that Rachel is the most beautiful woman that I've ever known. In 2021, Rachel became my girl, and I asked her to marry me. We got pregnant. We were in love, deeply in love. I wrote and rehearsed my proposal 50 times. I put on a suit, dragged a razor across my face, dropped to my knee, and she said yes. It was perfect. She'd send me pictures of that ring almost every day. I had an album full of pictures of this ring on her finger. Pictures in public, pictures in private. It was always on her finger where I put it. That ring, it stood for so much, but most importantly, it was this symbol of our forever. You see, after 20 years of us being in each other's lives at some level, we finally got to a place and to a point where we decided to be together. Rachel always used to use the phrase, when we picked each other. That's what happened when I slid that ring on her finger. We picked each other. She became my person, and I became hers. It really is that simple. I don't believe I ever loved anything or anyone more than I loved Rachel. This is a woman with beauty and brains. Rachel is smart. She's a pilot, an airplane pilot. She's also a helicopter pilot and a trauma nurse for Mercy Air. Rachel also has a JD and sat for and passed the California bar, making her a lawyer. Out of high school, she went to Rice, where she earned a degree in biomathematics. And recently, Rachel sold her home in Atascadero, California, and brought a home for herself and her girls in Dallas because she just accepted a new job, her dream job. Rachel's been hired by American Airlines as a pilot. She'll be flying jets all over the world for American. 737s, 767s, the big boys of the sky. And back to her beauty for a second. Rachel placed in front of Eva Longoria in one of the Miss Texas USA pageants. Now, she didn't win that pageant that year, but she won many pageants over the years. I'm pretty sure that from everything I just shared, that from where you sit, Rachel would be an amazing catch. Except for one thing. As it would turn out, every single thing I just told you except for one thing was a lie. These are all lies that she told to me and others. These career accomplishments I provided for you, and this reality, being a lawyer, a trauma nurse, an airline pilot, a helicopter pilot, working for Mercy Air, and a pilot awaiting her onboarding date at American Airlines, all of that, they exist in only one place. In Rachel's delusional and sociopathic mind. The only thing that turns out to be true out of any of this, the litany of things, alleged career accomplishments, is the story about her finishing in front of Eva Longoria for the Miss Texas USA pageant. Now, neither girl won that year, but Rachel placed ahead of Eva. I find that kind of amusing for some reason. Now, initially, this was going to be a love story. In my mind, I thought I was writing the greatest love story ever told when this all started. A story about two people that loved each other at some level for 20 years and finally found their way to each other. But, as it would turn out, I'm sharing with you a con. An enormous con. Perhaps the greatest con which I'm aware of. This turns out to be the story of a compulsive liar and a serial cheater, a woman that needed the constant attention of men, of different men. Rachel also used her medical knowledge to prey on a man that loved her more than anything in the world. And that's me. This woman perpetrated one of the most heinous yet false stories about cancer that you could possibly imagine. This is also the story of a woman that lied about the suicide attempt of not one, but two of her daughters. During the course of this story, Rachel kills off so many people that if these deaths were actually real, she would be the most prolific female serial killer of our time. She concocted the death of family members and friends, husbands, in-laws, some people that existed and others that didn't. This is a con that stretched out over 23 years, nearly a quarter of a century. Now, cons generally involve some form of consideration, money, property, something tangible. Yeah, I gave Rachel some money, but it was a negligible amount, a few $1,000 at most. In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing and hardly worth the scam. The juice wasn't really worth the squeeze, as the saying goes. I don't want you thinking I was swindled out of a bunch of money. I fell for this because I thought I shared a love with one of my favorite people in the entire world. Plain and simple. Did I see red flags? Sure I did, and I'll discuss them. Now, I hate this part. I hate doing this, but I have to add a couple of disclaimers here. I don't want to scare you away, but the first one is that if you're a cancer patient, cancer survivor, you may hear some things that are triggering to you. The story is also going to cover what I'll refer to for now as alleged abuse at the hands of a major medical facility by attending physicians. Physicians who took the Hippocratic Oath and swore above all to do no harm. The second disclaimer to you as you take this journey with me is that if you're a survivor of sexual, physical, or emotional abuse, you'll also likely hear things which may trigger you as well. I'm going to do everything I can to tread through these things lightly, especially the abuse pieces, but they're central to the story. These stories of alleged abuse are central to her life. They're also central to her lies. This is a story of a woman who was held hostage in a way in her hospital room, unable to talk because of a feeding tube in her throat for over a year, unable to move, to feel anything below her waist because of paralysis, a result of severe neuropathy, which was left untreated as a result of hospital neglect. And as a result of multiple brain surgeries, she was left with scar tissue, which couldn't be removed. And as a result, she lost a lot of memory. The last 10 years of memory. Every single bit of it. That memory loss, which you'll hear about, is also central to the story. And I'll get to that in time. Her memory and mental faculties were so bad, according to her and her doctor, that the hospital wouldn't allow her to sign a DNR or provide her with what's known as MAID paperwork. MAID is the acronym for Medical Assistance in Dying. You can also reference the late Dr. Jack Kevorkian. Near what would be the end of the scam, before she was exposed, Rachel was continuing to ask for this MAID paperwork, almost daily. Poor Rachel, so sick and weak, so depressed that she began to withdraw from most every doctor. She stopped speaking to and looking at any doctors that came in to help or provide daily exams. She was so humiliated from having to be cared for by her doctors and for what this cancer and chemo and radiation had all done to her body that she refused most every bit of attention that was offered to her. It got to the point where the hospital administration pushed for her to become a ward of the state because she had no power of attorney in place. She told me, as she did her doctor, she was not going to speak to, look at, or communicate with any of the doctors or hospital administration. She was clear about that. She didn't cooperate with any of it. Hospital administration said that if it were to continue, she continued to refuse care and didn't have a power of attorney in place, which they wouldn't let her sign at that time. They would push for her to become a ward of the state and send her to hospice. And that's what they did. Until, by some miracle, her doctor, who loved her dearly, fought for her and became her power of attorney. He was also able to petition the state to keep Rachel out of hospice. His goal, he would tell me, was to get her past her cancer and the litany of issues plaguing her so that he could hand her off to me to care for her for the rest of our lives. The thing about this doctor is that he put off his own retirement to see that Rachel wasn't left to rot or sent to hospice. This is a woman whose heart stopped 13 times in 18 months. A woman that had 10 broken ribs from CPR. She'd been shocked so many times that she had burns on her ribs and chest which required skin grafts, multiple skin grafts. Insult to injury, this poor woman was allegedly denied feedings, to the point that she weighed a mere 66 pounds. A body that was so deeply drained from chemo and radiation for a year and a half that she couldn't move. She would send me messages saying, "I just want to die. I need to get better or pass on. I have no energy at all, and I just have no will to live. Will you promise me that you'll go on?" She could barely handle her phone. She'd message me at times, typing just a letter or a word at a time. This tale transformed from the sweetest story I had ever known, one that made me believe that I had won the love lottery, into the saddest, most horrific, dreadful, and deceitful nightmare that I could have ever imagined. It began to affect me so deeply that I began to take a turn myself, a dark turn. Because, as it would turn out, Rachel was lying about everything in her life. And as you can surmise by the title of this podcast, she was also lying about her cancer. She lied about being kept in what they referred to as protective isolation, which is why I was told that I couldn't see her. Her severely weakened immune system prevented any visitors at all. According to her, that meant all the doctors had to be in protective suits when entering the room. A simple infection could have taken her life. These suits looked like white hazmat suits. She concocted the entire story. She ran this scam, not to achieve financial gain, not to gain property or anything tangible. She did all of this just to keep me in her life, but at a safe distance, to know that I was always there for her emotionally. This is a story that has so many secrets and twists and turns, you'll be left scratching your head. You know, people that lie about cancer, they say there's a special place in hell for them. Who among us hasn't been touched in some way? None of us are immune from this vicious, life-sucking disease, which cancer is. Rachel never had cancer. There's another colossal lie in all this. When Rachel informed me that she was sick with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2021, she also told me that we were pregnant on the very same day. She even provided me with an ultrasound, with all the pertinent information exactly where it normally is. The expected arrival date of our baby was August 22nd, 2022, the day after her very own birthday. We shared tremendous sadness about the recurrence of her cancer, incredible happiness and hope about our baby. As you can imagine, it was a lot, let alone to find out both things on a single day. Now, my story with her goes back 23 years, almost a quarter of a century, as I said. And here's another little tidbit for you. I'd be remiss for not mentioning that while she was running her scam on me, for 22 years, Rachel was coterminously running a scam of a different kind on another man. She just so happened to be lying and deceiving her husband and her family. Her husband, the father of her children, he's a man called Mark. It doesn't end there, by the way, in terms of deception and lies with men. It wasn't just Mark and I that were lied to and misled. There were many, many more men over the years. And as a matter of fact, there's another man right now that's being scammed. And at the point when I found out about this, there were likely 4 men involved with Rachel. In time, you'll hear all about the day I found out and the way I found out. You'll actually hear from the person that told me I had been scammed. And that's a story you won't believe. She spent her life, since her teen years after the tragic passing of her father, all this time she spent lying to her family and friends. Right now, to this day, she continues to lie to and about her own children and about her career accomplishments. She's cut off her entire family. And now her children don't all speak to her and don't all speak to each other. There's full-blown parental alienation happening. That's a term they use when one parent turns their kids against another parent. That's how bad this is. Now, you may be thinking to yourself that this is just a story of a scorned lover, a man that was burned and burned badly. And you know what? In a sense, you'd be right. But as I take you through my story, you'll understand every ounce of scorn that I felt and that I feel. As of the production of this podcast in the spring of 2024, Rachel works as a baggage handler and cross-trained agent for a major U.S. airline at the SLO airport. SLO is the acronym for San Luis Obispo. And being a baggage handler and cross-trained agent is a long way from being a lawyer, an airline pilot, a helicopter pilot, a trauma nurse. Now, the elements of her scam were insidious. She had me believing that she was this lawyer, also claimed to hold a nursing license. She said she was battling a recurrence of her cancer. And obviously she told me and showed me that she was pregnant with our child. These were the layers of deceit she wove around me. The lies about being a lawyer and cancer the first time began actually 10 years earlier. That's how deep the deception ran. She told me about it all 10 years ago. I'm a lawyer. I have cancer. Do keep in mind that she's the kind of evolved scammer that runs a little something different on everyone. And she can run multiple scams at one time. This is high-level fuckery at its finest. Her co-workers at the airport tell a completely different, yet equally perplexing and preposterous set of stories. These lies are made up principally of her own various successes and hero-like tendencies, tremendous work ethic. Now, with those co-workers, she's presently perpetuating a lie about a suicide attempt and the hospitalization of her second-born daughter. Rachel has spoken at length with these co-workers, fellow airline employees, about being a pilot and a trauma nurse on the Mercy Air flights. That's that part of the lie. I want you to think about something as I share this story with you. Keep in mind that the Mercy Air flights are helicopter flights. Do you know how long it takes to become a helicopter pilot? In order to fly a helicopter, it takes a minimum of 6 to 12 months, depending on frequency. To get a commercial pilot's license, you need to complete that course, which is like 650 hours. And then an additional training for multi-crew cooperation. That on its own is a couple of years. So, Rachel, the mother of 4 kids, wife to a man called Mark, and girlfriend to many, including at one point me, found time to train for this extended period of time to become qualified to fly for Mercy Air. She also found time to go to school to become a trauma nurse. That's a minimum of 4 years anyway. 7 years total, if my math is right on both of those things. Rachel also told me that she had become a lawyer. 4 years of college, a minimum of another 3 years for law school. That's 10 years between those things. Somehow, Rachel found time while birthing 4 babies, dealing with softball and volleyball and boyfriends and everything else life throws at you. All of that. By the way, as of the recording of this podcast, she's only 44 years old. And don't forget, she graduated from Rice University with a degree in biomathematics. Now, so that we can remain in an environment that, as the real lawyers would say, where things are factually accurate, let the record show that Rachel isn't registered in the California nursing database as an RN or a trauma nurse. Rachel's name also doesn't appear anywhere in the FAA national database as a pilot of any type of aircraft. Rachel used her alleged work with Mercy and the story about her daughter as a way to curry favor and get her coworkers to cover shifts at the SLO airport so that she could have time off, a lot of time off, and not lose her job so that she could be free to use her flight benefits as an employee to travel the world. Yet, quite literally, this is a part of her scam that's running right now, today. She's telling people at the airport that her daughter had this suicide attempt and was in the hospital at the same time she was piloting Mercy Air flights and acting as a trauma nurse, looking to trade shifts. Oh, my daughter attempted suicide. She's in the hospital. Can we trade shifts so I don't lose this job or my other job? That's how pathological she is. That's what we're dealing with. Meanwhile, she simultaneously has pictures of herself along with this daughter, who's supposed to be in the hospital, and her other daughters. They're gallivanting around the globe. Paris, London, Boston, Atlanta, Cancun, Cabo. These pictures are all over her social media. And she's in those fancy seats on the plane, too. The seats that are like a couch, like a bed, your own pod. She gets that treatment for free, of course, because she works for the airline. And if you can handle another crazy tale, at work, Rachel has also discussed at length an alleged sexual assault that took place at the hands of a fellow employee. An employee whose name I've been asked to withhold, as he has family of his own. Rachel claimed to have been roofied and assaulted by this man. And as it would turn out, Rachel and this man were actually an item at some level. A lot of flirting, texting, communication, general inappropriate workplace behavior. Eventually, Rachel would take back the accusation, but not deny the existence of a relationship. Neither of them would. During the course of my story, you'll hear how much Rachel uses sexual assaults and what happens to her at the hospital during her stay, among other times in her life. You see, faking sexual assaults and lying about rape is commonplace for Rachel. Rachel's own sister says that Rachel's been raped 100 times in her own mind. How mortifying is that? By the way, I won't continue to use that word. I'll say assault moving forward. I just used it to quote her sister and illustrate a point. And what's interesting about Rachel's sister is that at one point before she and I picked each other, Rachel and I were supposed to visit, she called me the night before and told me there had been a horrible auto accident. And just like that, her sister was gone. Gone in an instant. And Rachel's response when I asked her about her sister was that they weren't close. She was always jealous of me and we didn't get along. I have it all in text, like I do every single other quote from Rachel that'll come up. I want you to make a mental note about her sister's passing, because it's technically murder number 1 in the deaths which were concocted by Rachel. Murder 1, her sister Sherry. Now, I'm not sure what kind of person lies about the death of her own sister. Probably the same woman that lies about the suicide attempt and hospitalization of her daughter. I guess it's the same woman that can keep 4 men going at once, lies about being a pilot and a trauma nurse, and bragging about saving lives and delivering babies. By the way, and for the record, This isn't the first daughter she claims to have attempted suicide. During Thanksgiving week of 2021, Rachel told me that she couldn't see me because her youngest daughter had attempted to take her own life. Rachel ended up spending that Thanksgiving with all 4 daughters and her husband. She and I planned to spend Thanksgiving, but life and lies got in the way of that. Rachel's been very busy at the SLO airport. As it would turn out, it wasn't just her husband Mark and I that she was scamming. There was another man, a co-worker at the airport. On the next episode of The Messenger, the Rachel cancer scam, details about Rachel's involvement with the co-worker at the same time she was involved with me and her husband Mark. Rachel's long and not so illustrious history with men, including working as an escort and a stripper,